The Shoemaker and the Elf Story. Once upon a time, a shoemaker lived with his wife behind his workshop. The shoemaker was a good man, and he worked hard, but he was very poor. He did not have enough leather to make shoes. But if he did not make shoes, he and his wife would not have any food to eat. He had only enough leather to make one pair of shoes. He cut out the leather and then left it on the workbench. The shoemaker was very tired, so he thought of making shoes in the morning. The next morning, he found a pair of nicely finished shoes on his workbench. Soon, a man came in and bought them for a good price. With the money, the shoemaker was able to buy enough leather to make 2 new pairs of shoes. He cut out the leather and went to sleep. The next morning there were 2 pair of beautiful shoes. The shoemaker put them in the window, and before lunchtime, he had sold both pairs for an excellent price. It went on, and soon, the shoemaker became a wealthy man. The shoemaker and his wife wanted to know who was making all the beautiful shoes for them. So that night the shoemaker left some leather in his workbench as usual. Then instead of going to bed, he and his wife hid behind the curtains. They saw 2 tiny elves dancing in sewing shoes. The shoemaker was astonished. They both decided to repay the elves for their help. So, they made some warm clothes and tiny shoes for them. That night, instead of leaving leather on his workbench, the shoemaker left the clothes and hid behind the curtain. The little elves hopped up onto the workbench and saw the clothes and shoes that had been left for them. In the twinkling of an eye, they had dressed up. They were so happy. They clapped and jumped excitedly, and danced on the table, singing silly songs. The shoemaker and his wife never saw the elves again. They both never had any problems again. They lived happily ever after. Selling the cat. Once there was a big warehouse, where bags of rice were stored. There were many rats lived there. There was a stray cat that often comes to the warehouse for his food. The cat would silently come there without any sound and chase after the rats and eat them. Every day that cat comes and hunts down the rats. All the rats were very frightened and decided to have a meeting. They all gathered together and started their discussion. Rats were very confused and couldn't able to think of any solution to stop the cat. Suddenly a rat said, "We should tie a bell around the cat's neck. If they tie a bell around the cat's neck, the rats can hear the sound of the bell if the cat comes." Every rat thought that it was a great idea. But in the end, a rat asked who will tie the bell around the cat's neck? Moral of the story: most things are easier said than done. It is easy to propose impossible remedies. The Dove and the Ant. An ant was walking back to her home after a day's work. She walked along the bank of the stream. But suddenly, she slipped and fell into the stream. The ant was petrified and tried to look for something to hold on to. She then realized that she was sailing with the stream, away from her home. The ant panicked and started crying out loud, "Help! Help! Please help me!" The dove was watching all this from a nearby tree. Thinking smartly, the dove plucked some leaves from the tree and dropped it into the water near the struggling ant. The ant climbed safely over the leaf and reached the shore safely. The ant was grateful to the dove and thanked him. The dove replied, "It is my duty to help someone in need. I am glad I could be of help to you." Then the dove flew into the open sky. A few days later, the ant was walking through the forest. She noticed a hunter with a gun. He was aiming his gun at a pretty bird sitting on a tree. The ant immediately recognized the dove and ran towards the hunter. As the hunter was about to pull the trigger of his gun, the ant climbed up his shoes and bit him on the leg. The hunter shouted in pain and missed his aim. The dove flew away from the tree. The dove was saved just in time. The ant walked away happily as she able to help the dove in return. Moral of the story: one good turn deserves another. Every good deed we do for others will surely come back to us. lazy donkey. A salt merchant lived in a small village. Every day, he walked to the city to buy salt. His donkey accompanied him. The merchant loaded the bags of salt on the donkey, and they walked back to the village along the river. But the donkey did not like to carry so many bags on his back as he was lazy. The donkey always looked for ways to get rid of work. One day, the salt merchant loaded the donkey with 2 bags of salt, and they started walking back to the village. On the way, the donkey accidentally slipped into the river. The salt dissolved in the water, and when the donkey was pulled out of the river, he felt lighter. The salt merchant had to go back to the city to buy more salt. The donkey thought of this as a good idea to get rid of the load. The next day, the donkey intentionally slips into the river. When he was pulled out, he felt lighter. The salt merchant understood the donkey trick. He knew that donkey was falling in the river on purpose. So, one day the salt merchant filled a bag with cotton instead of salt. The donkey felt that the bags were much lighter than previous days, but the donkey wished to reduce the weight even more. So the donkey again fell into the river. But when he was pulled out, the load on his back felt much heavier. As the bag contained cotton, when it fell into the water along with the donkey, the cotton absorbed the water and the bag became heavier. The donkey had to pick up the heavier load. It realized his mistake and understood that the same measures will not suit all circumstances. He had learned his lesson. Moral of the story: you can befool a person a few times but not always. Those who are too clever sometimes overreach themselves and get trapped at their own risk. Thanks for watching.